Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Dharmaya.
Namo Dharmaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Sanghaya.
Namo Namah.
Namo Namah.
Om.
Om.
Okay, welcome. Before I begin, are there any practical matters that need attending to? That sounds good. Okay. So today, build is precept number 2 and 3. Whether we get on to precept number 3 remains to be seen. But yeah, it's possibly there. It may just be we return to it at a later date, or it becomes an exercise to the reader to reflect on that. But certainly, our focus this morning will be on precept number 2, and we may get to the other in due course. So I thought I'd begin by just saying a little bit about me. Sadaloka sort of mentioned some autobiographical details yesterday in his talk. I thought it'd be helpful, mostly because I don't know many of you, and many of you don't know me. I thought I'd just share something of myself, at least in my kind of my nascent spiritual life. So going back particularly to my teens. I was brought up, as they say, in the Church of England. So I was brought up with plenty of Christian conditioning. Incidentally, is there anyone here who doesn't have Christian conditioning? Okay, maybe some people online anyway, but that's kind of interesting. It's interesting from a sort of generational perspective as much as anything. But yeah, very much. I went to church. I was a very devoted chorister, a choir boy, I found that environment to be actually quite benign. The spiritual environment of the church was quite benign. And even at times inspiring. I think I particularly responded to the Christian teaching of love, very strongly, and even had some quite strong experiences of sort of an opening of the heart, which were of a different order, let's say, from what I would ordinarily experience. But I think one of the things that also sort of preoccupied me when I was hitting my teens was this very lofty teaching on love. Jesus says, "Love your neighbour." Even says, "Love your enemy." And at the same time, how? Christianity seemed very light on the how. What I really wanted were some practical ways of not only kind of moving in the direction that the teaching was pointing in, but even just reconnecting with some of the more positive and even quite powerful experiences I'd had. It just felt like there was a real absence there. I didn't really know how to move forward. So we're talking about a kind of the turn of the century. I think we can use that expression, can't we? About the turn of the century. I didn't have to go to Sumatra in order to find new teachings. I just had to use a dial-up modem to access Web 1.0, as it's now known. Incidentally, I've written a lot about this in my forthcoming book, Cyberloka, A Buddhist Guide to Digital Life, which will be published on the 5th of November by Windhorse. Thought I'd just get that in there. So yeah, and in particular, I do go into my kind of misadventures with spiritual teachings on the internet. But yeah, I basically looked all over. I went around as much of the kind of spiritual neighbourhood of the internet as I could at that time, just mostly text, if I'm honest. And you'd have the teachings from various swamis and babas and Sufis that have been transcribed in obviously very devoted people had transcribed these huge tracts of text. But I was looking for, in a way, a bit like these disciples here. I was looking for the highest teaching. I was looking for the way to just open up my mind in ways that I knew were possible, but I didn't really know how to reliably attain. And I did kind of think it's curious, like this whole question around the highest teaching, the pursuit of the highest teaching. It's a bit like going into an ice cream parlour or something, asking for the most popular flavour. No one ever goes in and says, "Can I have your sort of mediocre flavour or your least popular flavour?" Everyone wants the best one. So I was reflecting, why is this we go for? Why is it I went for anyway? These highest teachings. And I think there's probably three things, three sort of reasons why I was drawn to the highest that at least the internet was capable of providing me with at the time. I think one was a kind of anxiety, actually. I think I was looking for something that wasn't going to betray me. I was looking for a teaching that I could feel confident in, so, that gave me a sense of security that I was moving in the right direction. So there was a kind of anxiety around that only the highest teaching could allay for me. There was, I was like 15 at the time, but I think at the same time I was there was also an element of self-flattery. I wanted the highest teaching because I was worth it. I wasn't going to settle for something less than that. And then I think this is probably more interesting. I was after the highest teaching because sometimes it really seemed to work. I'd read something, and then I had this kind of very new meditation practice. I'd read something and I'd bring it into the meditation practice, and it'd be like, whoa, something has really, really changed. I talk about it now in terms of dhyana. I was just sort of whisked off into dhyana. So it was like I'd find this teaching, and it would seem to do the business. It would seem to work for me. It's interesting. As I say, I was 15 then, but this kind of trend of the highest teaching seeming to work has continued into my order life, and I can see it kind of playing out for other order members as well. We encounter a new meditation book or a new meditation teacher or method or whatever, and it's like, gosh, this really seems to do it. This seems to do the trick, and then being the kind of personality I am, I want to tell my friends about it, and I kind of go back to it, and it works the next day and the next day, and so I write into Shabda and say, isn't this the best teaching? This is what everyone should be doing. This really works, until it doesn't, and it's sort of like, then what happened there? This was going so well. It seemed to be providing me with this inspiration out of nowhere. It seemed to be really working, and then I press the dhyana button and nothing comes out the bottom. So I was reflecting a bit on that. What's that dynamic about? In particularly in relation to this idea of the highest teaching. And I suspect, maybe we've discussed this in our groups, but I suspect that what's going on there was Dharma Chanda basically was doing the work. Dharma Chanda, interest, excitement, just a wholeheartedness. actually that was what was doing the work in terms of the meditation experiences. I'd have these high teachings, or these supposedly higher teachings, but it was my interest which propelled me into dhyana and into even insight. And I think that's particularly important when it comes to this idea of the highest teaching, because there's a danger that we literalize that. That we think it's the highest teaching that's doing, or the teaching is what's doing the work. Whereas actually it's much more, I think, much more our attitude or the spirit that we're bringing to our experimentations with the teaching, rather than the teaching per se. I don't know, you may disagree, take it up in your group. It's something which I think appears in one of Bante's aphorisms. I saw this on a postcard years and years ago, I think even before I became involved with Tree Rattler. Was, there are no higher teachings, only deeper understandings. And I think that aphorism, no higher teachings, only deeper understandings, is something of a counterweight to this tendency to literalize the highest teaching. So that was a bit about me and my own sort of, some of my misadventures as I was going through that. I could chart a few more of them as well, but you'll have to read my book for that. I should say though, it doesn't seem as if Ku, Noke, and Drom, or Noke or Noke, I don't know how to pronounce these names, but if somebody can speak Tibetan, please fill us in. I'm not saying that's how they're approaching this question. From my understanding, these guys are serious practitioners. I don't think they're going to be taken in by this sort of literalism of higher teachings, as I put it. So I'll just read this out. At another time, a teacher was asked by Ku, Noke, and Drom, "What is the highest teaching of the path?" The teacher replied, and so we'll see in the resources you've been given. There's an italicized bit, which I think is the translation in Sadaloka's fatter volume. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the new translation.
That's the new translation. Yeah. So the regular font is what appeared in the text as Bante studied it. And I'll just read that out in here. So Tisha replied, "The highest skill is in the realization of egolessness. The highest nobility is in subduing your own mind. The highest excellence is in having a mind which seeks to help others. The highest precept is continual mindfulness. The highest remedy is in understanding the naturelessness of everything. The highest activity is not to conform with worldly concerns. The highest siddhi is the lessening and transmutation of the passions. The highest giving is found in non-attachment. The highest moral practice is a peaceful mind. The highest patience is humility. The highest effort is to abandon attachment to activities. The highest meditation is the mind without pretension. The highest wisdom is not to grasp anything as it appears." So you've got a teacher not just giving, in a way, one highest teaching, but a whole, just a whole, an array of heists, if you like. And what you might want to do in your groups is, if something has particularly struck you in that list, do bring it in. I mean, some of them do seem quite counterintuitive even. Maybe this reflects limitations in my own perspective, but when he says the highest excellence is in having a mind which seeks to help others, gosh, maybe I don't really understand what it is to have a mind which seeks to help others. And Bante, particularly in the seminar, goes into this one: the highest meditation is the mind without pretension. And there's a bit of that in the commentary that follows. And what is the final goal of the teaching? The three disciples asked. I really like this. These disciples, they're not squeamish about appearing goal-oriented. You know, they want to know the final goal. Yeah? And clearly, they're just really motivated to prod Atisha for teachings. Atisha replied, "The final goal of the teaching is possession of the essence of voidness and compassion. Just as in the world there is a panacea for all sickness called the solitary heroic medicine, there is the realization of voidness which remedies all the fettering passions." So I don't know how Bhante only limits it just to one comment, but the essence of voidness and compassion is what he particularly hones in on as being, for Tibetan Buddhism, where it all ends up. I'm actually not going to try to say very much about the essence of voidness and compassion here, but at this particular point in the talk, come back to it a bit later. But I would encourage you to. Well, it's extremely lofty, isn't it? The essence of voidness and compassion is incredibly lofty. Like, how do we make contact with that idea? How do we even just sort of, what angle can we approach it from, which takes it out of its abstraction and makes it more real for us? That would be my question to you. And then there's another question. It's not clear who this is from, but maybe from one of these three disciples. But many say they have realized voidness. Why do their anger and attachment remain? And Atisha's response is, they are speaking empty words. For when you fully realize the meaning of voidness, your body, speech, and mind react with pleasure, like slipping fresh butter into barley soup. Isn't that a great image? Slipping a fresh butter into barley soup. So you've got this sort of substance which just kind of melts into the soup. Maybe we should ask. I don't know whether Lizzie is on tech at the moment. We should ask Lizzie to brew up some barley soup for us, so we can enter sort of sensorily into this metaphor. But I really like that. This is maybe on a much lower level, but I do think I've got some inkling of what this might be pointing to. So where I live in Oxford, my partner and I live in a flat, which is the sort of middle flat of three, one on top of another. And in the flat above us, there's a small family. Well, actually, it's probably a normal-sized family, but they've got small children. So they're a couple of girls, aged 4 and 7. They're really, really lovely girls. But they are, 4 and 7. And our flat is sort of built to kind of British standards. In other words, it's not very well sound insulated or sort of insulated in any way. Those who are joining us from Germany are just like, what are these British building standards like, Anyway, so what it means is often when I'm meditating in the morning, the girls upstairs are getting ready for nursery and school, and they're very excited. They're very excitable, and sort of thud 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 thud, and then sometimes a pause, and then they're crying, and then they recover and so on. But anyway, I'm trying to meditate, doing my sadhana or mindfulness breathing or something, and. So, sometimes at my worst, I can find that quite irritating. It's like, the thuds sort of, they're less than 2 meters above my head, and it feels a bit oppressive sometimes. But sometimes when I get a bit more absorbed, it's really, really interesting what happens. So it's like they're not sort of thuds anymore. They're sounds. And the sounds just seem to dissolve into my mind. Yeah. So the solidity of the thud, or the solidity of the sound, it just it's almost like it dissolves into, or sort of fades into a kind of kriti. And it's like, gosh, you know, this whole kind of well, in a way, this moves on to the next bit of the text, but it's almost like what is real in this? You know, how real is this thud? How real is this irritation that's going on? I don't know. Anyway, it just sort of it is a bit like slipping fresh butter into barley soup. It's like the sound becomes a pleasure which can feed into and even enhance the meditation. What is that? So then Atisha quotes the great sage Aryadeva, who says, so Aryadeva is a 3rd century disciple of Nagarjuna, Indian disciple of Nagarjuna. And Aryadeva says, the nature of existence, is it empty or not? Merely feeling this doubt tears samsara asunder. Whoa. The nature of existence, is it empty or not? Merely feeling this doubt tears samsara asunder. And it's like that on the lower level I was just describing. You know, it's almost as if the sound of the thudding and my irritation are a kind of samsara, which I give a reality to. And when there is even a quite sort of low level realization of voidness, to sort of use this language, or even there's a sort of quick questioning of the reality of that. It is, yes, as if the sort of the fabric of samsara does sort of start to fray, or the solidity of samsara starts to dissolve. So for you, how do you relate to that? Is that where is it that the sort of fabric of samsara tends to fray more easily for you? Where does this quite general principle of, well, this general question, the way Aryadeva puts it, the nature of existence, is it empty or not? Where does that general doubt find specific expression for you? And how through that specific expression can you enter into more of this almost kind of global perspective that Aryadeva is pointing to? Therefore, when you realize the correct meaning of voidness, it is just like the solitary heroic medicine, for all of the path is included in that realization. Which is what the disciples then pick up on, isn't it? You know, a teacher's sort of thrown them a little bit of bait in this question. All the path is included in that realization. So they ask naturally, well, how do you include the entire path within the realization of voidness? It's a sort of obvious question in a way, but they're not letting a teacher get away with sort of leaving loose threads, are they? They're really sort of milking him for all the teachings they can get. So his response is this: all of the path is included in the 6 paramitas. When you realize the correct meaning of voidness and lose your blind lust for all things, material and spiritual, you lose your blind lust for all things, material and spiritual. Your life becomes one flowing act of transcendent giving. In the absence of attachment, you are no longer defiled by non-virtuous deeds, and you enter the ever-flowing harmony of transcendent moral practice. In this freedom from defilement, you also liberate yourself from the passionate domination of I and mine, and attain the ever-flowing transcendent patience. As you take great pleasure in the realization of voidness, your life becomes one ever-flowing transcendent effort. Through this, you lose all attraction to objects and enter the ever-flowing transcendent meditation. And finally, when your mind is freed from the habit of seeing everything through the prism of 3 aspects, you will attain the ever-flowing transcendent wisdom. I believe that the 3 aspects here are the idea of, say, in the case of giving, the giver, the gift, and the recipient. Certainly that's one way you can interpret that. as a sort of subject, the other person, and the object. So really, the main point here is just what happens when the practice of the paramitas is informed by prajna. You get this. I love this expression, the ever-flowing transcendent patience, or how to describe this one? It's the ever-flowing harmony of transcendent moral practice. It's beautifully expressed, and really points to the fact that we're not talking about a kind of begrudging or a dutiful practice of these things. It's more like they are the natural consequence of, in this case, the language is the realization of voidness. And that's the point that Bhante makes, really. So he goes on in his commentary, at least as we've got it here, to talk about the punya and the jnana phases of the punya and jnana aspects of accumulation in the direction of Buddhahood. We're going to come back to that bit in a bit too. Okay, so I think this is probably the last quote. Last quotation from this particular precept. So we don't know which disciple is asking this, but they say, "Is it possible for one who realizes the meaning of voidness to attain Buddhahood with only the wisdom and meditation of voidness?" So is it possible for one who realizes the meaning of voidness to attain Buddhahood with only the wisdom and meditation of voidness? Atisha replied, "Whatever you perceive, whatever you proclaim, there is nothing that has not come from your own mind. Understand that this realization of mind is empty. Understanding the non-duality of the realization of mind and of voidness is wisdom. Meditation is the continuous concentration on this wisdom without any distraction. Deeds are accumulating merit and wisdom while you realize from the viewpoint of this meditation that everything is like an illusion. Once you are under the influence of these three, their practice will come even in dreams. Once it has come in dreams, it will come at the moment of death. When it comes at the moment of death, it will be present in the bardo. Once it is present in the bardo, there is certain to be accomplishment of the superior siddhi, and you will become a Buddha." So, there's a couple of things I want to draw out, largely just expanding on what Bhante says in this particular goblet, this particular extract, which I think makes sense of the whole thing as a single precept. As I was looking through this, I've been looking through it for a while, I've been sort of thinking, well, how does this all hang together as just a single precept? And I think the answer to that is in the way that Bhante comments on it, in his commentary on it. So Bhante, basically, the first thing he says is he puts, Atisha puts his disciple on the path of regular steps. So in a way, he challenges the question. He's saying, no, it's not enough to have a purely theoretical appreciation of voidness, whatever that might be. He points the disciple to his own mind. In other words, he sort of says, you need to come back to your experience here, which probably is a pretty familiar trope for many of us. Come back to our experience rather than being caught in the kind of more intellectual understanding of things. And so that's the first thing. Is he's putting the disciple back onto his experience. But then the second thing, and this is the thing I think is a really wonderful and under-recognised teaching, is Bhante, in effect, it shows how Atisha is articulating an ascending and a descending path, or a path, let's say, with ascending and descending aspects. In this particular case, the teacher's talking about the path looking like deeds, meditation, wisdom, and then from the basis of wisdom, then meditation and deeds. So you sort of ascend, and then you then to the point of wisdom, and then you descend again. This reminds me, actually, I hope this is okay, Udara, that I mentioned this. When I was talking to you over, I think it was lunch yesterday, you mentioned that you'd been on a 1-year retreat at Uttara and I was just really interested in that, but I didn't ask a very good question about it. I think I just said, well, how was it? It's like, how do you summarise a 1-year retreat? But I thought your response to it was really redolent of this particular idea, because you said, well, it wasn't so much the year itself as what happened afterwards. I'm slightly paraphrasing what you said, but it was almost as if the way you said it was, you'd built up a certain amount of, even wisdom on the course of that retreat, which then needed to sort of infuse and inform the rest of your life, and that seemed to be what you were focusing more on in the way you were responding, which is very much this sort of ascending and descending form, isn't it? And it seems to make sense of everything else in this precept. So, the previous bit Bhante was talking about the punya and jnana. It's like we ascend with punya to the point where we get some jnana, and then we descend again. That sort of goes into the fabric of the rest of our lives. Similarly, Bhante talks about the mundane Eightfold Path is the sort of ascending, and then the transcendental Noble Eightfold Path is when samadhi, perfect vision, starts to inform our emotions, our livelihood, our actions, all of that kind of thing. You also get it in the way that a teacher talks about the paramitas. So if you remember, he talks about what happens when pranya starts to affect the other paramitas. It's the same kind of thing, and I think it also makes sense. This is my attempt trying to make sense of the essence of voidness and compassion, shunyata karuna garbha, as the end point of that path. So it's like you sort of build up this momentum to the point where you have a realization of shunyata, and then the rest of the path is compassionate expression. It's how it starts to find expression in the not only in our minds in meditation, where the sensory environment is much simpler, there are fewer variables to deal with and so on, but in our actions, in our relationships with others as well. And it's sort of like after you've sort of traversed that arc, then you have the essence of voidness and compassion. And I think it also says something about these folk who say they've realised voidness. But I love the way. I don't know whether this is the case in the original translation, but the way that it says, well, some say they've realised voidness. They're speaking empty words. I just wonder, is there a play on words there? Does that appear in the original Tibetan? They're speaking empty words because they haven't done that. They may even have a kind of glimpse of the jnana, but it hasn't sort of suffused. It hasn't kind of gone through all of the different levels of their being to the point where they're no longer experiencing anger and attachment. And I think we're all like this, but probably all of us have had some, glimpses of the transcendental. I think at one point Bhante even said that was a kind of condition for being ready for ordination, that you've had a glimpse of the transcendental. So it's like we've all had that, and yet it takes time, and it takes, in the words of a teacher, continual mindfulness to ensure that it does reach all of the bits of us. Wherever we are, not just on retreat, in the whole of our lives. So I do think this was particularly interesting. The way that ascending and descending, those two aspects, the ascending and descending aspects of the path, sort of make sense of all the rest of the precept. So returning to me and my story at the beginning, it's like actually that's what I was after. What I really could have benefited from was somebody saying, look, you've just got to start on a foundation of innocent, wholesome action. Yeah, and on that basis, you start to meditate. The joy and the pleasure of that tips over into a very natural state of meditation. And on the basis of that, you start to interrogate the nature of reality. And then that understanding starts to percolate through the rest of your life. If somebody had just said that to me, aged 16, rather trawling through, Swami after Swami, or ordering these VHSs from the internet, it's like that's what I was really after was a path, and a path which it's broad, but it's articulated in a way which makes spiritual sense. So that would have been tremendously helpful to me, and I'm just so grateful I have actually encountered it. We have all encountered it. But I think it also goes back to the question at the very beginning of this precept. This question that Kuno Kandrom asked Atisha. What is the highest teaching of the path? Now, I think there's very little context here, but I suspect that for these chaps, the emphasis on the question is the highest teaching. They want the highest teaching. Whereas what Atisha does, or what he seems to give, is the path. So the emphasis in Atisha's answer is not so much on the highest teaching, although he frames what he says in those terms. It's much more on the path as a whole. And that's Atisha. That's exactly what Bhante has done as well. That's precisely Bhante's perspective. It's not like you can say of Bhante, he's the guy who said single teaching, insert single teaching. It's much more like, here's somebody who has, just in the way that Atisha does, where he this is obviously kind of stereotyped in a certain way, but he outlines a whole context within which a path unfolds. So I do think, Sadaloka was mentioning this earlier, just the affinity between Bhante and Atisha is very strong in this. Atisha is not going to be sucked into giving a single teaching, a kind of single highest teaching, which then everyone can literalize and grasp onto. He's much more like, no, what you need is the breadth of spiritual life within which a path can unfold. So I'm not going to get onto Kadampa precept number 3, unfortunately, in this session. But what I want to do is particularly invite you in the discussion groups to go into that question of the path, and particularly the path of regular steps. Now, where is it for you that the path needs regularizing? I'm sure it does in some way. Where is it that you're sort of casting ahead in your Dharma life, and it being kind of empty in the more pejorative sense of the term? What do you need to do to ground that, to found that even in a way which you're then able to build upon and to descend from into the rest of your life? Good. So let's leave that there, and we'll have a 20-minute tea break for those joining us on Zoom. Is there anything else we need to say? Good. Okay. So yeah.
The statistics for tomorrow will be put out on the resources page after we finish.
Great. I'll just repeat that in case that wasn't clear. So the study resources for tomorrow will be put on the resources page soon after we finish this session. Good to see you in 20 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.